Today we're going to get into Dawn's story. What we're going to do is we're going to let her tell you what happened, and then we'll criticize her a little bit as we go along. There are plenty of things we're not going to touch. There are plenty of things that she went through that are just not our business. We're here because we think she's a bad mom. So that's what we're going to touch. We're going to talk about gray rocking, what she said to her daughter-in-law, and then we're going to let her tell her story of why her 3 male children have decided to go no contact with her. My name is Max. I very much accidentally started talking about estranged parents, and now here I am. If this is something you have any sort of experience with, consider subscribing. Like the video, and then unlike it, and then like it again. Hi Dawn, can you share what it was when you got to hold their baby for the first time that was said they found unacceptable? Interesting. So she held their baby. Again, Dawn said that the person she was after her concussion was someone who her daughter-in-law tried to have in their life, but then couldn't. And so her daughter-in-law pushed her son into being estranged, is kind of what we've gotten so far. We have been told a couple of things, like Dawn saying that at some point she left her daughter-in-law 20 voice messages on Facebook Messenger, but she didn't tell us what those messages were. Now we're getting a little look into what they were, maybe. We're getting a little look into what their relationship might have actually looked like, instead of just like very generic, this is kind of maybe what happened, LOL JK.
I will answer that question right here, right now, of what I said that led to the first estrangement from my son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter. It was the first time that I was holding my granddaughter. She was a few months old, and this was due to COVID restrictions.
It would be so funny if she was like, I was holding my granddaughter, I like pretended to drop her. Just kidding. They didn't like that.
They were wonderful parents and honoring everything that their pediatrician had recommended, which was no in-person visits until she had had all of her immunizations, which I think was 3.5 months.
Okay.
My daughter-in-law was across the porch. We were outside on their little deck, and she was across the porch, and she had a very sad and forlorn face, and pretty much the entire time. And I tried to make light of the situation, to make her smile.
She like looked over and she was like, why the long face? Hey girl, how you doing?
And I did a poor job of that. I said, does it piss you off that everyone says she looks like her dad?
You just call my baby ugly?
Because she did look just like her dad.
If me and Lee had a kid and somebody said that about the kid, oh my God, dude, that is a wild way to call that thing ugly. What if it comes out with a mustache, Max? Don't talk to me. Do not talk to me.
And because in the stepmom's photos that she shared on Facebook, everyone commented, my gosh, she looks just like her dad. As soon as I said those words, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. That sounded horrible to say.
I don't think it sounds that bad.
That was my immediate response. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I apologized. My son, who at that point was back to holding his daughter, said, oh, she's too pretty to look like me. Look, she's got her mother's mouth. She's got her mother's eyes right there. And I proceeded to take a family photo of them before I left. And then I got in the car and I sent my son a message on Messenger and again apologized.
Dude, why do old people like using Facebook Messenger so much? Like, do you not have their number? If you send me a message on Messenger, I'm not seeing it.
They had gone inside. They had discussed apparently what I said, and the way that it was repeated was not the way I repeated it. I didn't say it in a nasty way.
So here's the thing, right? We have to understand as adults that your memories are not real. They're just not. The way that people remember things, generally, not the way they happened, period. So, if 2 people are having a conversation about the way you said something, and you remember it differently, you're probably wrong. That sucks, but also you just went on a whole thing about how you had a concussion and your personality was different and you couldn't remember things, and like you're setting us up to be on their side.
I was trying to make her smile. In hindsight, I should have asked her, hey, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Like, I should have been more compassionate and caring and asking her, but we didn't really have that type of a relationship.
So if you don't have a type of relationship where you can ask her if she's okay, what made you think it was okay to say something that you thought was a joke?
Our relationship was not very close, and so
also, like, you have to understand that if that's your relationship already, it may not have been what you said. It's the fact that you were willing to say something after probably having set a boundary before. It doesn't matter that you said this thing. It matters that you were probably pretty critical of her leading up to, and this was the last thing she wanted to hear from you.
So I felt like I would be overstepping some boundaries if I asked her really what was wrong. So I apologized. When I apologized the second time, my son came back at me with anger that I had said that I wasn't thinking when I said that. And it wasn't until a couple of days later that he said to me that we are going to be taking a break from you.
Wild.
He said that I always make jabs at his wife, which I didn't realize that I did.
All of them at some point say, oh, I didn't realize. Oh, no, us? Never. Obviously, if this is how she feels when she didn't even want to be near you while you were holding her child, there's a history of something happening.
Nothing was intentional, but that was what he said. And I did not see my granddaughter again for 5 more months.
It also doesn't matter how intentional or unintentional you are in the things that you say. I don't care why you said things. It matters a lot more what you say. It matters a lot more that you say something than it does why you do or don't.
My daughter-in-law has since stated publicly that they were just going to take a break for a couple of weeks, but I said that she was too sensitive. She says that I said in the message that he needed anger management.
What?
I don't recall saying that.
Check your messages. Your memories might suck, but you can scroll through your Facebook Messenger.
I was, however, still deep
there it is.
on very strong antipsychotics, deep in the recovery from my psychosis, and still recovering from my concussion. So I may have said those things. I do remember saying something to the fact of having only sons. I don't understand the sensitivities that females have.
In my experience, and this is my personal experience, this has nothing to do with any sort of facts or statistics, or this is just my experience. Men are so much more fragile and sensitive than women. Women, again, in my experience, don't care that deeply unless they already care about you. Then your opinion matters. Men are so fragile. Men, you call a man a snowflake and he's like, I'm not a snowflake.
I simply don't. And she said it was at that point that they went no contact, but I never received a message from him re-clarifying we are no contact. But this is why I share my content and my mistakes, because when they took a break from me, I should have just done nothing. Yes.
What a great point. Diane made the same point 4 years later. Do nothing.
I should not have sent her cards. I should not have sent anything for my granddaughter.
Right.
I should not have reached out to my son.
We're taking a break from you. Cool. I'm not taking a break from you. Is wild.
For estranged parents or parents on here whose children are low contact, or you're wondering about your relationship, if your child says we need a break from you,
that's
hands
a break.
off. All the way.
All the way.
Zero communication, because you will dig a bigger hole by trying to fix things. And this is why I share what I did wrong, is to help other estranged parents not make the same mistakes I did.
She is entirely different in the way that she presents this information than what we've seen before. She's willing to say, I made these mistakes. I'm going to share them so that you don't as well, which is so close. And then at the finish line, I don't know why I'm holding a pen. I don't have anything to write on. Or to write. I think I just like having something in my hands. Like for the last couple of days, it's been my chapstick. She gets to the finish line. All right, hold on. Somebody just played me back in chess. I have no attention span. That's mine. She gets to the finish line. And then she says, and it would have been my fault if it wasn't for the antipsychotics. If it wasn't for the concussion. And you're just so close. So close. All she has to do is be like, it was my fault. My bad, G. Instead of, it was a concussion. Gray rocking. Let's talk about gray rocking real quick. If you don't know what gray rocking is, and I'll click on the video. If you don't know what gray rocking is, it's when, in this specific situation, one of the parents will talk to the child over the phone or in person, and the child will just answer very matter-of-factly, yes, no, okay, I'm fine, yep, okay, whatever. And they don't show any emotion, not because they don't have any, but because any emotion they will show will either be adopted or forced against them. And so you just stop handing them over your feelings. You just, okay, yep, whatever, GG's, yep. Great. Let's see what she has to say about it.
I also wanted to reply to this comment when I was talking about what to do if your child has gone low contact and how to definitely reach out and see what you've done to cause that, because once they go no contact, it's very likely that they will stay no contact forever. And I received this reply, which was, instead, ask them about them, ask them about their life. Like, he was mad I was saying it was all about me.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, once a child has gone low contact, they most likely are also gray rocking you. Gray rocking means being as boring as a rock, means giving them very little response.
I don't know if gray rocking specifically has to do with situations like this, or it can be applied to when you're talking to somebody for the first time and they're not interested in talking to you, so they just like nod their head. I have no idea, but like that's also a thing, right? Sometimes people are just not interested in talking to you, and I don't know your relationship with them. Typically, I would just say leave them alone.
Higher up in the comments, someone said that she was in touch with one of her parents twice a year, and then she kept all of her personal information close to herself and didn't share it. She didn't want it to be used against her later on with this parent. So this, honestly, reaching out, asking them all those questions when you have been low contact with your child will give very basic surface level, non-revealing answers. That's what happens. That's what gray rocking is. Every forum, book, all of that's talking to young adults about going no contact with their parents will tell them that in the stages to move to gray rocking so that your parents don't have any information about you. Just be as boring as a gray rock. Give very basic answers, yes and no answers. So that's why I didn't go into talking about them. Absolutely. You know, if the communication opens and the adult child lets you know what has been bothering them, then absolutely, at that point, remember to concentrate on them and ask them questions about them. And do not expect that your estranged adult child is going to ask you questions about you, what's going on in your life, or your health. Those things will not happen. So
also, just don't make it about you. If your purpose in talking to someone is for them to ask about you, you're not someone that they're going to want in their life. You're just not, dude. There are a few people in the space who like reach out to me anytime they have like an issue and they want to talk about, which is fine, but they're not really people I consider friends.
Just take it off the books. It's not going to happen. You guys take care. Good morning.
Good morning.
I've had a lot of good questions, and I'm going to try to answer this one in 10 minutes or less. For those of you that have seen what happened before, you'll know this would be a miracle.
So we have to go into this video realizing that we're going to get one side from someone who themselves has said her memories from that time may not be entirely accurate because of her concussion. The problem now with attaching your concussion to so much of what you did and said is that along with that comes the memory loss and how like we may not be able to trust the things that you think you did and said. Memories in general aren't the most trustworthy things. Memories when you're right off a concussion, probably not something we should just take for a fact. And that's kind of the hard part about going into this and just having one person's story is you want to believe them and you want to like hope that they're telling the truth. But at best, they're telling their version of the truth, which just can't be accurate. That is exactly what that is. She's an unreliable narrator. And you can take her hand and walk to wherever she's going to take you. But there's no real reason we are to believe that she knows the way anywhere. And we're just going to get lost. We're just going to get lost. Unintentional is a word there because This is assuming she's trying to tell the truth. She could also just be leaving stuff out because she's embarrassed or because she feels shamed or she just doesn't want to say it. In the same way that she said, oh, I didn't really know this was a problem between me and my daughter-in-law. She could just leave stuff out because it proves that they had problems before.
But this is what I've learned in the last year. So why are my children no contact? My children are no contact because of a multitude of factors. Me being the primary character, I'm the one that they're no contact with. My life was one filled with trauma and was not one that was addressed with therapy.
Which I think applies to a lot of us. Like we all have our own traumas and some of us went to therapy, some of us didn't, some of us found help, some of us didn't. As an adult, and I mean an adult, not just 18, 19, 20. I mean when you're an adult and you're having kids, you have to find a way to put them ahead of your trauma. And I say that as someone whose mother did not do that. My mom has very specific traumas that now as an adult myself, I look back and I go, yeah, that sucks. That's hard. I don't know why. There's plenty of things my mom should not have had to have gone through. And it sucks that she did. It excuses a lot of her immaturity. It does not excuse the way that she had 2 children she refused to raise.
And when I had met their father, I was in a fast forward mode trying to achieve everything that I needed to achieve before I reached the age of 29.
Which is like 29 feels old for people who are went through trauma as a kid, want to grow up as fast as I can type of thing.
I didn't think I would even live to be 29. That's what happens when you live a life of trauma. And even though there were red flags to his narcissistic tendencies, I did not have the strength or the...
I will say, 29 feels old to me, and I think it's because of our access to information. Like as a 25-year-old, when she was 25, like you're not going to go into the library and just try to read all day. We have so much more information just available to us, and we're able to learn a lot faster. And this goes back to literally anything. Right now, there are more chess grandmasters being made than at any other time in history because kids are learning how to play chess so fast because of the internet. So there's like more people at the age of 12 and 13 becoming grandmasters now than there ever been just grandmasters in general, just because of how fast they're able to learn chess online. We have more information now that we have access to than these people ever did. And so I have to govern myself and say, okay, I probably knew more information, not really how to apply it, just the fact that I had more information by the time I was 20 than she had at 29. And so there's like a skew there where I do have to be like, okay, maybe 29 is not as old as I think it is.
Or the self-esteem to be able to stand up to those red flags and end things, even though I did try to end things when we were engaged.
Also hard. There are plenty of times where I have to stop these videos and go, we will not criticize this person for whatever, for this. For her, we're not going to criticize her on her marriage at 29, for not leaving the first 7 times. She said it took her 8 times. That's part of being a person, and that sucks. And I hope that did not affect her children too much.
So we got married and we had our first child. I actually left him before I found out I was pregnant with my first son. But once I found out I was pregnant, I was like, this is it. This is my life. I need to make it work. Yeah, that sucks.
That's an easy way to feel trapped.
So I did everything I could to make it work. And it wasn't until my youngest was not quite 2. And there were many times between that first time I left or the second time I tried to end things and the time my son was almost 2 that I had tried to end things. But something happened that I was like, no more.
If you have made it this far, I'm going to drop a very quick reminder not to drop any comments about why she may have had more children with this person. That's none of our business. It's hard being the person in this situation, and that's not something I think most of us understand. We're here to criticize her on her parenting later on.
And it takes 7 to 8 times for someone who was abused to leave their abuser, and it was the 8th and final time. I did not realize that when you leave or when you discard a narc, that they will do everything in their power to make your life hell. And that was exactly what he did.
We did not get very far into Breakdancing Dad. I found Breakdancing Dad really, really hard to listen to. A lot of the comments about him were like, yeah, whatever, but his wife was a lot worse. Whether or not that's true, and whether or not her ex-husband is a narcissist, does not change the fact that Breakdancing Dad is also pretty bad on his own. And she herself is also pretty bad on her own. Just because one side is a narcissist doesn't mean the other side isn't. I'm glad that she was able to leave eventually. It sucks that it took 8 times because she is right. The average is 7. It takes 7 times to leave an abuser. That doesn't excuse you being an absent mom, in her own words, being a neglectful mother to her 3 children.
And, he did everything in his power to alienate my sons against me, but that's just part of the story. The other part of the story is, my being raised in a narcissistic family cult by a silent generation.
I will say, we're going to take all this as truth. So here's what we have so far. She's being raised in a narcissistic cult family, gets married to a narcissist. You will not convince me that she happens to be the only one in this situation that is not a narcissist.
Cult leader with boomer uncles.
Dude,
my upbringing was very strict, and so I was indeed very strict with my sons.
That's something that needs to be broken, and my generation is doing a very good job of, this was a problem that my parents did. I will make sure not to do it with my kids. It sucks to be abused. It is awful in any way that it happens. I can remember plenty of times where my dad just beat me for no reason, or he threw me for funsies. And I would never use that as an excuse to put my hands on anyone. I've never put my hands on a partner. I've never considered hitting a child. And if I did, I wouldn't be able to just excuse it by, this is what my dad did to me. That's gross. It is your job to break out of the cycle. You do not need to do something to someone just because it was done to you.
Did choose my battles. I loved them very much. I don't think they doubted how much I loved them. But I did not have a typical family unit to model.
None of us did.
To understand how to be a loving parent. That's for sure. The teen years became...
I'm trying to figure out how to say that. I don't see the excuse in, I had a bad family, so I created a bad family. I can't find it.
Became very difficult. I had tried to get therapy for my oldest multiple times when things were, showing that he needed therapy, and he would not open up to therapy.
How old was he?
And so I tried the tough love, because tough love is what the parenting style was at the time.
So she said she was unable to be a loving parent and then doubled down on it, which is what the tough love is.
When kids were acting out. And so that was very tough on him. And it was difficult. I tried to work with their father, who would always say, I'll talk with them. And that's what he did. He talked with them. They saw him every other weekend, and that was about it. At this point, when they were teenagers, my body started to implode with one chronic illness diagnosis after the other, and my rare disease symptoms started, but my doctors were stumped. So it was very difficult for my kids, because when I wasn't working, I was sleeping, I was resting. And so a lot of things came down on their shoulders, to help around the house and stuff like that. Their teen years probably were not fun and were filled with worry, I'm sure.
This is hard because what we know so far is that she hasn't been the best mom, and she hasn't been the most attentive or the nicest. And now she's in a place where she needs help from her kids. And the kids, one, are teenagers. Like, they don't understand anything or can regulate their emotions. They're now in a place where they go, this mom who hasn't been the nicest to us needs our help. If you do a good job of raising your children, they will pay you back. And it's going to be hard as teenagers, but they probably would understand enough to go, she's having a hard time, we need to help. if you were someone who was helpful to them. Tough love was the parenting style at the time, and they're surprised that there's an estrangement epidemic. Yeah. No, that's a great point.
So as they started to leave the nest, my oldest left very early. He left very early, and there was nothing I could do to keep him at home when he wanted to come home.
I wish he was a little bit more detailed, because there's a difference in like leaving to go to school and leaving to be away from you.
When he realized having heat and having hot water were important, of course, I let him come home.
I hope to God she did not hold that over his head. I hope that she let him come back and was just like there for him. That's a hard thing to do.
It was, they were difficult years. They were very difficult years. And I made lots of mistakes. I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. I thought that modeling not drinking, modeling not smoking, modeling not using drugs was what my kids would need. But that...
She missed the point that she made earlier when she said she did not have a good familial structure to base her raising her kids off of. And now she's saying, I thought modeling these actions was enough. You should have modeled what you missed, which was a parent being an active and good parent. And everything else, like not smoking, not doing drugs, whatever, that will fall into place. That will come alongside it.
They needed more than that. So, eventually one by one, they started off into the world and each had their own ways and, and challenges. And I tried to support them the best I could with what I knew. And I made mistakes. When my oldest met his wife, she was very complimentary to me as a mom, saying I did such a great job raising my son.
Something that people in general don't realize is that sometimes people say nice things to you to be nice. Not saying it happens all the time. I'm just saying that she doesn't know you. And if a stranger says you were a good mom, they're probably just saying that to be nice.
And thanked me because he was such a wonderful guy and treated her so well. I should have at that point said, well, I wasn't the perfect mother. I should have at that point, brought up the fact that I made many mistakes. I didn't. I was raised to not bring up horrible things when something good is said.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that I had, because that would have opened some conversations at that point.
She should not have said anything there. She should have just nodded her head. Yep. Cool. Thanks. But I, again, would just not believe that.
And allowed me to apologize to my son then. Things with my middle son were difficult health-wise. And we had some challenges where, I had to take him to the VA hospital when he was literally screaming in pain. And he was very, very, very sick. And, I was happy to take him to the hospital. I wished he wasn't, as sick as he was. And when he was going through treatment for what had happened, it was related to having mono when he was in high school. I was trying to get him to advocate for himself, and I was very forceful about that. And that caused him to go about 6 weeks without speaking with me.
So far, every reason we've had for her children choosing estrangement is her being very forceful. Something that we don't get to see a lot of, but can probably conclude, is people's problems with control. And it usually stems from anxiety or people not understanding that people are different. Something that people do is they'll give you advice and then get mad at you for not following it, which is a good reason why you should just not give unsolicited advice. And when you do give advice, whether or not it's asked for, you have to give it with the intention of it never being done, because you're going to disappoint yourself if it doesn't happen. That's a control issue. Maybe it's not a problematic one, but it's there.
And I learned to be much less forceful about trying to get them to advocate for themselves, that they needed to make their own decisions. My youngest and I never really had these head-butting issues, honestly. My youngest did go to a boarding school for students that were gifted.
So me and my youngest son didn't have any issues because we didn't have to interact. Fair, really fair. I don't know how much of a mom you are at that point.
From his sophomore, junior, and senior years.
Oh, no. Okay, that's just 3 years. Never mind. That's like, so he lives with you up to 15?
And I advocated for that. His father did not support that. His father did not pay anything towards the tuition for that. And it was where my son needed to go because he's gifted.
Yeah, everyone's gifted, dude.
You know, his response to his brothers having issues with me was that his child, you know, his memories didn't reflect their memories. And he felt it was because he didn't stay home when he was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, their young adulthood was challenging in different ways. And I think one of the biggest ways was that I had never had a parent as a young adult. I separated from a foster family when I was 18. There was nothing they could tell me about what to do or who to see or anything about my life at that point, even if they tried. So I was very grateful to my son's girlfriend because she really made a change in his life and he started making some really good decisions. And I was happy to celebrate in that and to see my son as I knew he could be.
This is another situation where I wish you would get more specific. Like, what is it about your son that changed because of his girlfriend, now wife? Because there are plenty of people, it happens with men all the time. Men struggle to develop empathy until it's because of someone that matters to them. And we can go back to like, there are plenty of men who like didn't bother getting vaccinated because they just didn't feel like they had a reason to. But if there was a woman in their life, a partner, a mom who was like, do it for me, they'd do it. And so is your son now growing up as a person because they have someone they would like to grow up for and who can help guide them? And that then leads to being like, oh, my mom's kind of not great. Or what else is happening there? She seems like she has a good set of ideas. A lot of the things that she has said have been calm and rational. I think she may have struggled to put those ideas into practice when she was younger, during the formative years of raising her children. And that sucks because sometimes things are just bad timing. However, then she ends up making this entire TikTok channel. It seems like it's just for attention.
But they took that as me being obsessed with him. I was just happy to see him being such a great guy. So when, you know, the horrible timing of events was that I suffered a brain injury.
We come back to it. So this is my problem with her after the fact that she's posting on TikTok, is that when it comes to the time, she does such a good job of being like, here's some things that actually may have happened. Here's something that I may have said. Here's something that I did. And when it comes to the part of her going, it was my fault, she goes, it was because of my concussion that one time. Or because of the psychosis or whatever. And if she can say that, and if she said that, and then followed it up with, I'm going to take accountability for it anyway. It was during a time when I was not myself, but it was still my fault. That is entirely different than building up all this information just to say it wasn't your fault. Yes, that is a great way to put it. It may not be the reason, but it's not an excuse. You should realize that. I think she's smart enough to realize it. I don't think she's empathetic enough. And I don't want to say ready because it may never happen. I don't think she's empathetic enough to say that it is her fault anyway. She said she apologized, but that's another thing that's so vague. Yes, she's picking the very last thing that she did and saying, this is something that I did. This is one thing that I did. This is one thing that happened. I didn't realize it was the last thing. Just because it was the first time you noticed that there was a real problem does not mean it was the first time there was a problem.
I had no one that I was living with, and the brain injury was a very severe concussion.
Yeah.
That I was knocked out for over 45 minutes.
Still wild to think about.
Within a year. A second concussion within a year can kill.
Again, I didn't put this on YouTube, so sometimes I sound a little insensitive. I've had multiple concussions, so I'm a lot less sympathetic towards her specific situation. I do find times where I have said and done things that I definitely would not if it weren't for the concussions, but they were still my fault. I still did those things. I still said those things. Granted, none of them were like problematic. Like I didn't hit my head and start spouting off racisms or anything, but they were mean and they did not need to be. Still my fault. 100% my fault.
You, and it almost killed me. Healing from that concussion took a very long time, and it took a lot of medical intervention, and it caused me to have a lot of behaviors that were very difficult for my oldest and his wife while they were expecting my granddaughter. It was difficult for them to process, and again, living alone, there was nobody to intercede. So when I went into a mania and a psychosis that made things even worse, I do believe that it went right down the pathway of their father telling them that.
I'm sure the extremes are not as bad as she's making them sound. Absolutely. Like everyone of these people is very like hyperbolic in the way they speak.
Your mother's crazy anyway, because when I would set boundaries when they were teenagers, they would say, Mom, you're crazy. You're just crazy.
Welcome to Twitch, where it takes me 4 hours to go through a 10-minute video.
Alone, there was nobody to intercede. So when I went into a mania and a psychosis that made things even worse, I do believe that it went right down the pathway of their father telling them that, your mother's crazy anyway, because when I would set boundaries when they were teenagers, they would say, Mom, you're crazy. You're just crazy. And the way they said it, I knew it came from someplace else.
Yeah.
So as I was healing from the psychosis, which causes brain damage, as well as my severe concussion, it was extremely difficult. And my son and his wife tried to give me a second chance. I was undiagnosed at the time with PTSD. And it was thanks to my son telling me to have my...
Here's where you should consider that there's no way to reconcile. If you were given multiple chances by them and you still found a way to ruin them, they don't owe you a chance at their kid. They do not owe you a chance at doing what you did to them, to their child. You don't. You're not owed anything. You should protect your child before you consider the feelings of your parent. That makes so much sense to me.
Therapist look at our communication, that it brought about the PTSD diagnosis. This is going to have to go into a second video about why I'm estranged, but I think it's important. So that's the rundown of why I'm estranged, but we'll get to part 2.
All right, this is the last video we're doing today.
So when I left off, I mentioned messages and PTSD diagnosis after my son and daughter-in-law gave me a second chance. But I did not mention the first situation because I was trying to fit it all into 10 minutes.
I think if you're scared of ruining this second chance, you have to say, hey, I'm not myself right now. I'm going to stay away until I'm back to being myself so that I don't make our relationship worse.
The first situation of no contact happened quite shockingly to me after I held my granddaughter the first time when she was a few months old. You have to remember this is during COVID, like before any vaccines were available, and doctors were very cautious with newborns. And my son and daughter-in-law are great parents, and they followed the doctor's orders. So it was a porch visit, and my daughter-in-law was very forlorn looking the whole entire time. And I said something trying to lighten the mood. I said, because many pictures that my ex's wife had posted had comments saying, my gosh, she looks just like her father. And so I said, without thinking, now this is not an excuse, this is a reality. I was on lots of psychiatric meds from my mania, from my psychosis, that were keeping my brain down. Like it slows you.
I don't have a lot to say about this because we already heard this story. We heard this a little earlier. Again, we get to the part where we go, sure, not your fault. Go, sure, it was because of the meds, but you still have to take responsibility for that and for who you are and your actions. You just do.
Your brain down from thinking. It slows it from processing really fast. I was on a boatload of meds. I said, and I said it in a joking way. I said, does it piss you off that everyone says that she looks just like her dad? My son's response to me saying that on the porch was, oh, she's too pretty to look like me. And my daughter-in-law didn't really respond, but the minute I said it, I also said, wow, that didn't sound right. I'm so sorry. I should not have even said that. That was my response the minute I said it. And I took a family picture of them before they went back inside and before I left. Then when I got in the car, I sent another apology to my son through Messenger. That was when my son came back at me, very upset that I even said that, because my daughter-in-law was adopted, and me being raised in foster care, I should have understood how much she wanted to have a child that looked like her.
That makes more sense now. We didn't have that information before. She didn't mention that the last time, I think. Huh. That adds a lot of context in why something like that may have been hurtful.
And honestly, with where my brain was at, post-psychosis, post-concussion, still trying to heal from those, and both of those take sometimes upwards of 2 years to heal from, and I was healing from both of them together, I did not take those into consideration. I had a friend who was adopted who I remember taking all of that into consideration when her first baby was born. So that's on me. I did not take that into consideration.
I also think you're probably a lot more careful with your friends than you are your children. Like when you have people in your life you've chosen to be kind to, it's easier to be nice to them than people that you just expect to be in your life for no reason. You're probably a lot more filtered around your friends than you are around your children in the ways that you are yourself. Not like random conversations, like you probably don't talk around your kids. You probably don't talk about like sex around your kids, but you would be fine talking about that around your friends. But you're probably more of who you actually are around your children than you are around your random friends.
But I did apologize the minute those words came out of my mouth. You know, later on, I learned that the reason she was still so forlorn with me is I still had not apologized to her directly for my behavior during my mania and my psychosis. I had apologized to my son multiple times. So as a result of that comment, that was when my first no contact happened with my son and daughter-in-law, and I lost all access for the next 5 months. And I was devastated, and I did everything wrong. I sent gifts, I sent cards, I sent emails, I sent cards to my daughter-in-law.
We revisit the point that I made a few videos ago where I say, if you let people talk long enough, they're going to show you who they are. And it happens with all of them. So she's saying that she did all these things wrong. And what she's doing wrong is taking the boundary that they've set and crossing it. And then later on, we have that video where somebody commented, boundaries are just a way of control. Something about not letting her see the granddaughter. And she reposted it. She reposted it like, yep, you're right. Boundaries are just their way of controlling me. So that's where we go. She sounds rational. She sounds smart. She sounds like she knows what she's talking about. But when you let her talk long enough, she goes, boundaries are just their way of control. Again, you're not owed anything. You're not owed any access to your granddaughter. And if you can't have a good enough relationship with your own kids, you should not even have a chance at having a relationship with their kids.
I still at this point was not looking at anything to do with no contact online. I had no idea about anything. None of this. I had no clue. I had no clue about any behaviors that adult children would do if they thought that their parent was a narc. I had no idea. 5 months in, my son did reach out and said that they would like to meet with me and sit down and discuss some things. And so I agreed. And they offered meeting with me at a public park. And I thought that they were doing that so that I wouldn't be able to see my granddaughter.
They're going to break up with you.
A babysitter at their home. And I was very surprised to find that they had my granddaughter with them. But I realized once I started investigating in the no contact world that they do that so that the just no mother-in-law or the narcissistic parent won't, throw a fit or make a scene.
Ooh, that is wild. The fact that they have to go through that just so that you don't make a scene. Consider just not making a scene. You're an adult.
I've never made a scene with either of them.
Okay.
There was one scene I made with my son when he had a friend over and they were smoking weed in the basement when he, was still quite young. That was the only scene I made with him with someone, but never made a scene with the two of them. But I was horrified when I saw that was why they met with me in a public place. We set boundaries. They set boundaries. I did set a boundary that I would stop reaching out first. I would let them reach out first. And because I had been so excited to be a grandmother, I was so excited to have another relative, to have a female blood relative. I had no other female blood relatives on the planet other than my granddaughter. Being an orphan is a very traumatizing experience. Adult children will say they orphan themselves. No, you still have those relatives are still on the planet. You are an orphan when there are no other blood relatives on the planet.
Is there a difference? I will say for a lot of these situations, it would probably be easier if the parents were not around. If there were no Dianes to make videos, I think the daughter would be okay. We're gatekeeping the orphans now, dude. That's so funny. There's so many like weird nuances there. Like, what if you're adopted and your adopted parents are deceased and you don't know about your IRL or like your bio parents? I would say you're an orphan.
That's when you are an orphan. However, I was undiagnosed with PTSD. My therapist did not see the signs, even though he heard the signs. And, because I would leave the visits with my granddaughter just shook, just waiting for them to stop me from visiting with her. I was worried that everything I said was going to be held against me.
Maybe don't say things that are worth holding against you. I don't know what to tell you, dude.
I was worried I was going to say the wrong thing.
Don't say the wrong thing.
I was worried that I was going to say something that was going to upset them.
Don't upset them.
So I would, panic and think when I left that I was just going to get a message that I had done something wrong. And I would share this with my therapist and he still didn't see it. He would try to tell me that things were going well.
Again, like assuming this is the same therapist as last time, this dude is doing a terrible job. No. You're fine. Just avoid the issue.
Then I had some trauma come back into my life after Christmas when my dog started showing signs of a brain tumor, which he did indeed have. And still being unhealed completely from my psychosis and my brain injury. This is not an excuse. This is a reality that I was living that made my emotional liability more difficult. Not having someone that I lived with to help me to, monitor myself as far as my emotions, my emotional liability was concerned.
She probably wouldn't believe them. Like if she had somebody that she was living with, I was like, you don't think that's a little too much? She'd probably just be like, no, it's not.
Reached out to my son first in regards to my granddaughter, which was a boundary that I had created.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't you just set that boundary? She just set that boundary and then she crossed it.
And he didn't take well to that.
Right.
Instead of not responding to his harsh response to that.
No, his response is not going to be harsh. The fact that you crossed a boundary is the issue. Their response to you crossing a boundary after multiple times that you've crossed boundaries is not a harsh response.
The granddaughter, I responded, and I shouldn't have. I should have walked away. So from that point forward, I did everything I shouldn't have done. And it truly wasn't until I did everything that I shouldn't have done, which was trying to justify, trying to explain, trying to...
I think a lot of people get caught up in this idea of, no, I did it for a reason, let me explain. When it doesn't really matter why you do things, it matters what you do, whether or not you do things. If you are held to boundaries, it doesn't matter why you cross them outside of emergencies, and this is not that. I don't want to hear your explanation. Your child doesn't owe you the time. Your child does not owe you okay, I'll hear you out. There are boundaries that were set in place that you crossed. There are boundaries that were set in place that you crossed. There are boundaries that you set in place that you crossed. There are boundaries set in place that you crossed. It does not matter why you cross it every time you cross it. The fact is, you broke those boundaries. And they let it happen more than once. They let it happen more than twice. It sounds like they let it happen 4 more times, which is 4 too many.
Trying to stop the horror from happening that was happening right before my eyes in real time.
That you created. The horror that you created. That you are fanning. It is your fault and you are pushing it forward.
That I finally started looking into, adult child estrangement, and I realized, Jesus, I'm doing everything wrong, but I'd already done it all wrong.
I realized, Jesus, it happened to him too. And it's like a Family Guy cutaway, right? Where it goes back to Jesus arguing with Joseph and he goes, "You're not my real dad," and he walks out.
The other thing I did wrong is I involved my middle son in conversations in regards to his brother.
And then this goes back to when she said flying monkey. And also, like, people pointed out in my comments yesterday that she was misusing the term flying monkey a lot because flying monkey would be hers. Any messenger that she employed would be, not one that they did, because she's the narcissist. And she was like, "Oh, my son's flying monkey."
And when I told my middle son that I had sent a book to my granddaughter.
What book? Please, like, they all do such a bad job of getting specific. If she'd been like, "Oh, I sent a book to my granddaughter," and it was just like a casual book, okay. But if like, "Oh, I sent my granddaughter the Bible," that's a problem. "Well, I sent my granddaughter this book by Emily Giffin," also would be a problem. Please just tell us what is actually happening.
Which was a book about Noodle, and I tried to cancel the order because I realized, damn, I shouldn't have done that. I couldn't cancel the order, so I involved telling my middle son, please let my oldest know that I tried to cancel the order and I couldn't. It led to my middle son being very authoritarian to me about the situation, which I did not take very well, and that led to our estrangement. And then along came, my youngest had been very, very, very low contact after his middle brother moved very close to him. And when I started doing the TikToks,
dude.
My youngest was not upset about the TikToks. He was upset that I was not taking accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he said he was going no contact. And that's when he said that I was emotionally abusive in their childhood. And he said that if I harassed his father,
gonna be rough.
That he would never speak to me ever again. That is not a boundary for him. That's a threat. That's where I say it's a threat. And harassing his father is me being truthful about the abuse that I received from his dad. So that's my story in 20 minutes. Hope this is part 2.
She's another mom who, through her own challenges and issues and abuses, has found a way to transfer all that into her children. And when her kids bring it up, she decides it's not her fault. And she'll find plenty of reasons to do so. She does something that we have not seen a lot of other mothers do, which is say, "Yeah, I did do those things." When it comes to the part where she should take accountability, she goes, but I had a good reason. And took a little bit of a fall one time. So we're making progress. It's just unsatisfactory.